So, welcome and good afternoon. Are you ready for the best Wednesday of your week? Please grab a pen and a paper. And using your non dominant hand, write down a journey or adventure that you have experienced in the last decade. And I will give you 30 seconds to write that down. Doot, 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 doot. And as you're writing, I am going to share my adventure journey. It was actually longer than a decade ago. But my dad was a helicopter flight medic when I was a child. And I had the opportunity to fly in helicopters with him at a young age. I became obsessed with all things flying. I went to ground school, and every time I had enough money for fuel, I would go get my flight instructor and rent a Cessna. One day, as the sun was setting and I was beginning my descent into Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, I didn't quite hear the air traffic controller. And in a blink, he was telling me to pull up. I had a 737 on my tail, getting ready to land on top of my small Cessna aircraft. This was quite an adventure for me, and it included several fees and fines for a stupid choice that I had made. And I realized I needed a career change. So, in my journey of wanting and dreaming of being a pilot, I had to pivot. I had to make changes. I dealt with the loss of a dream. I had to deal with feeling less than to my dad. So, change is difficult. It can be a hardship. It might take us out of our routine. And just like when I asked you to write down your journey with the pen in your non dominant hand, how did that feel for you? Go ahead and write that in the chat. What were your thoughts when I told you to do that? First of all, there's a few things because nobody wants to be told what to do, right? We immediately go, eh. So it felt awkward. Some of you probably even refused to do it. It was uncomfortable. Some of you are thinking, I've been there, done that. I know where she's going with it. Okay, Holly felt slower. I already know what's going to happen. These are common emotions when we have to make changes. So think for a moment, what if you could inspire others to make a change in their life simply by sharing your story and your journey? What if you could be known for something incredible? What would it be? So visualize what it would look like if you could inspire change in your teams. Today, you will learn how to engage them, motivate them, empower them simply by sharing your stories and journey with a simple framework and strategy. All right, change is a constant in our lives. If we want to progress as human beings, it's 100% factual. We will continuously be dealing with change. Some of you are all dealing with administrative changes right now. The Federal Bureau, with the change in presidency, you're dealing with budget changes, changes even in locations. You might have to be moving, or you're having to go back into the office. You've stopped hybrid. Maybe you're even dealing with some changes trying to get promoted. So you are definitely in the line when they are handing out changes. Changes, turn and face the strange. Little David Bowie for you today. So often change can lead to change fatigue, which leads to disappointment, discouragement, and apathy. And often we're thinking, somebody else, please make decisions for me. I'm done. I'm out. I'm tapped out. Not only are we dealing with change fatigue, we have change failure, and 70% actually. So 70% of organizational change efforts fail, according to the statistics from McKinsey and Company. Eek, right? That is a lot. 70% fail. So in the chat, I'd like for you to write down some well-known companies that have failed to implement organizational change. Just write them down. What's the first ones that come to your mind when you think of companies that have failed? Okay, Blockbuster, always the first one, right, Kimberly? Blockbusters, because we all went there, and then it went to Redbox, and now we get it in the comfort of our own home. But what's another one? Kodak. For those of you who, that's all there was, right? You had the Kodak, Toys R Us. Yes, that one was such a surprise. Kmart, J.C. Penney's, Sears. Motorola, Circuit City, Big Lots, Party City. I didn't know about that one, Christina. Party City. Coca-Cola Formula, Radio Shack. We have BlackBerry, Borders. So we can go on with some of these companies that is the first thing that comes to your mind. And what are the clues that change is needed? We look at these and they go, they failed to innovate. They failed to make the changes that were right in front of them. They seem like they were right in front of them, but when you're going through it, it's not as clear. But there are other clues as to failure that we have to ask. Why do people resist the needed change? In order to be a Jedi change agent, first we need to identify the change. Is it a small incremental change or a major shift? Like you're going to the moon and Houston, we have a problem. When I asked you to write down an adventure earlier with your non-dominant hand, raise your hand. How many of you actually did what I asked you to do? And Mark, I love that book, Who Moved My Cheese. If you guys are taking notes, that's a great book on change. So how many of you, okay, so a few of you actually did what I asked you to do. We have 60,000 thoughts a day chaotically running around in our brain. Out of those 60,000 thoughts, 80% of those thoughts are negative. Your initial mindset or reaction was probably, I don't really need to engage. This is weird, or I've done this before. I'll wait and see what she's going to do with this. It's silly. It's stupid. I'm not doing this. It wasn't my idea, right? All these thoughts, our brains can think of several ways to resist against change, even if it's a small incremental change. So several years ago, I wanted to, I shared with an organization on leadership, and they were going through change and they were really struggling. And so I went there consulting, and I worked with this particular organization that hired a director who implemented a new software program for the entire plant. Now, I've been doing this for 3 decades. I know I'm as old as Cher. And it seems like every single time when you're going in to consult, it's the same thing that happens over and over again, just the names have changed. And this particular leader went in with a software program that was going to implement a matrix system where the supervisors had instant access to the metrics for every person's job. What machine, what equipment, what tools, the length of time it took, down to the amount of minutes and hours every day. And this change was going to save money. People they wouldn't have to work overtime. The deliverables and production was going to be astronomical compared to what they had been doing. So the leader came in thinking he was going to be the hero. But what do you think happened? Instead, he went from hero to zero fast. He missed the secret sauce. Resistance is a force that slows down motion, and this leader thought he was going to propel the motion forward, but instead it slowed down to a crawl. Why? Why? Because he didn't get trained. He didn't get any change agents on board. No buy-in, no ownership. The people felt like robots. It's like press one and outcome. It created so much conflict, the morale plummeted. And why? They only saw the loss. And if you're taking notes, write that down. When your people only see the loss, the only thing that was in it for them, smaller paycheck, because they were working overtime and that was implemented into how they're paying their mortgage. A lot of their security was messed up. It didn't meet their financial goals. Everyday habits were deconstructed. He messed up their routine. They had to do things differently than what they had been normally doing. So their choice, their autonomy was removed. So instead of happy community, it was a grumbling community with low morale. So let's pause. Let this sink in. When people resist change, there is something going on below the surface. When people resist change, there is something going on below the surface. People don't resist change, they resist loss. So you are here today because you are influential. You're an impactful leader. My invitation for you right now is to learn these practical steps, and we will repeat what we don't repair. So if we're not repairing this and letting this all sink in, these steps, we just keep repeating the behavior like this leader did. So be a Jedi change agent. How do you become a Jedi? Identify the change that needs to happen. Engage your stakeholders. So who needs to be a part of this? What audience do I need to bring in? And cast the vision. Allow for the mindset shift. So you see here the change arc. What is the normal reaction of a team when there is a proposal to change? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Looking at this change arc, what is the normal reaction? Okay, Rachel, the change arc, do you have that one, slide 4? There we go. Okay, fear. Why? Anxiety. Resistance. So how do we become a Jedi? Identify the change that needs to happen, and then engage the stakeholders, be able to get in their brains, and allow for the mindset shift. The 3 questions that we need to have answered: what does the change mean to me? What's in it for them? When I first got out of college, I became a certified mediator and I went into the airline industry helping with what do we do when we have a bomb on the plane? What do we do when we have a hijacker? How do we negotiate? And the first thing that we talk about in negotiating is what's in it for them. So if you're taking notes, WIIFT, what's in it for them? Because it doesn't matter how we want to move forward if we don't have the people we're dealing with on board, right? So what's in it for them? Then the second one, why is it happening? Why do we have to do this? When I asked you to grab a pen and paper, why? Why do you want me to do this? Why do I have to use my non-dominant hand? What will it look like when the change has been made? So those 3 questions, those 3 things need to be answered. What does the change mean to me? Why is it happening? And what will it look like when the change has been made? If we are aware of these questions, then we can create a communication plan and cast the vision. So, how do you strategize the implementation of the vision? You get into the minds and emotions of what is happening in your organization. It's time to get your freak on, right? That means it's time to dance. And what are the steps for those dance? For those dance? What are the steps for the dance? One, identify the change. Two, who needs to hear it? Who are your stakeholders? And three, cast the vision. Give them the bigger picture. What's in it for them? Share the loss. Be there with them when they're explaining to you what their loss is. Get teams buy-in and ownership. So how do we get the buy-in? Identify, define your strategy. Implement a team. Who are your change agents? Determine who they are and what's in it for them. That will help you in defining your strategy. Often as leaders, we are highly competent at our job, but not overly competent in helping others get unstuck and change their mindset. So in other words, we're so caught up in what we're doing, especially if you're new.
Great. It's just, I guess you can tell that maybe this was a hospital.
Sorry, Kyle. I think you have, there we go. We got you muted there. So defining that is being able to go, hey, I need to pause here and not be so caught up in my change that I'm presenting and start really talking to my people. They might refuse quietly or they might be very overt about it. I was working with a team a little while ago, and they had quite a few members who did not want to use Microsoft Teams. They said, email me. I don't need another platform to learn. What do you do with this when you're a leader and you have quite a few people on your team that doesn't want to use the software that you have available to them? So your approach might be different, but how you gain trust is universal. Gallup polls show that trust is at an all-time low. And we sense that, right? Politically, in organizations, the younger generation talks about it, where trust is at an all-time low. And remember that trust is transactional. It is a two-way dialogue. So be vulnerable as a leader. Be empathetic when your team is coming to you and they feel like you don't understand. And if you act like you don't understand and basically say, you need to get over it, you need to get unstuck. I mean, there's a time for that, right? But at the beginning, if you're not listening to them, they are thinking, okay, fine. If you're not going to hear what I have to say, I'm going to go to some other loser who will hear me. And that negativity will spread, right? Negativity is contagious. So be vulnerable, share your change story. I get you, I've been there, but this is what I did to get unstuck. There's a great quote from President Roosevelt. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. So think of that. People, they don't care about all this other stuff. They don't care what you know until they know that you care. Your people want to know you have their backs. You legitimately want them to be successful. So let them know. And if you're taking notes, write this down or say it with me a couple times. I value you. I want you to be successful. I value you. I want you to be successful. One more time. I value you. I want you to be successful. All right, we have here, I'm going to give you a question. Why do 70% of organizational changes, why do they fail? Why do these efforts fail? Throw it in the chat. What's going on? What are we doing that's creating so much of this? Okay, lack of vision, not knowing your people, lack of clarity, not dedicated yourself to the change, not understanding the environment and variables. We don't acknowledge the emotional impact. Omar, I do think that that is a strong one. We're not acknowledging that we're so caught up in the task that we forget that to humanize the situation, right? And yes, Mina, the steps in the change is unclear. We're not getting the buy-in. We're not getting the ownership. So when you go and you rent a car, if you're going out of town and you've been driving the rental car around, do you go and vacuum out the car and go to the car wash and get it clean before you return it to the rental car place? It's like, no, we don't. We have complacency, Mark, because we don't own it, right? It's not ours. When you are telling your children to go do the dishes, are they like running in there to do the dishes, running in there to grab the trash and empty the trash? It's like they really don't have the buy-in and the ownership of what it means to make the house look clean. So they're just not there. They're so used to being told what to do that they're not really engaged and motivated to make those next steps. So, how do we brainstorm and figure out for all of our team members, how do we get buy in? How do we get them to own this? We treat things differently when it's ours. If people don't have the task or the ownership, it's easier to stay stuck. They they just stay in the difficult and in the costly and in the weird mindset about change. So, to effectively implement a team position for success, leaders must select members who display a high degree of skill in these six key elements. One, they have commitment. Okay, we know they're sold out on this and they believe in the future of the company. Uh, they want to win. They're in it to win it. They already have a lot of value and they contribute often. They're good communicators. They cooperate. They're really good with conflict management, which, by the way, is another training. Feel free to ask us about that. And they have connection, 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 connection. Relationships matter to them. So we want this six. The team must represent all of the needed functional groups and roles necessary to manage the change initiative by formalizing the team and providing funding and other resources. It sends a message of accountability and responsibility, and it also illustrates the investment the organization has made to the change. Okay, here we go. Setting the tone. It starts with you. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself. Oh, right? It starts with you. Michael Jackson, it starts with you. It's as simple as how you language things. So think for a moment. When you started today, the first 3 minutes at the beginning of the workshop, what did you hear me say? I said you. You will have the best Wednesday of your week. What if you could inspire others? I engaged you immediately. I hooked you with a question, and then I put you in the scene. You're like, wow, you did all that? Yeah, I did. I had you interact by writing your journey. So, lastly, I did some storytelling about myself. So, it took 3 to 5 seconds for you to know, hey, I am trying to make myself relatable. Yes, I'll be your advocate. I'm in it with you. We are in this change together. So it's about you, the audience. And if this is all you walk away with today, is to make sure you're languaging and saying you when you're talking and casting the vision, then that is so powerful. I see leaders all the time say I, and me. And occasionally they'll say we, which we is good, but really try to use the word you when you are casting the vision. Put them in the scene. Scene. Your team wants to know where they fit in. So language the vision with the word you. Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. Show me what you want, what you really, really want. I had to get it in there. Okay. How do we know what's in it for them? And on this slide, it says what's in it for me, but you're doing it for what's in it for them. It's by asking powerful questions. Stay curious. So, in other words, I'm going to pick on Mark because he's the last one in my chat here. If I were walking down the hall and I'm Mark's leader and I say, "Hey, Mark, how's it going?" And he says, "Fine." And he keeps walking. Now, normally we let that go, right? People are fine, no big deal. But when we ask powerful questions to our team, these are open ended questions. Open ended questions are different than closed, right? Closed means what? Yes or no. Open means we have to get basically a better answer than just one word. Okay, so Mark walks by. I say, "How's it going?" He says, "Fine." And I go, "Whoa, hey, Mark, on a scale of 1 to 10, what does fine look like to you?" And he says, "A 3." Now I want to unpack that a little bit. All right, Mark, what would it look like? How would you move that 3 to an 8 or a 9 or a 10? And Mark says, "Well, if Omar would get that file over to me so we can make these changes that we're dealing with and we can hit our deadline, then I'd probably get an 8. I'd probably get an 8 in my day." So now I know I've asked Mark a few more questions that I can understand what's going on in his day. That's how easy it is. So for your homework today, I want you to somebody is out there for you to ask 3 open-ended questions to. And it cannot be your dog, okay? So a sweet mate, a kid, a coworker, just simply pause there and unpack what's going on and start getting in the habit of asking open-ended questions. Put it on your calendar for the next 21 days. Ask open-ended questions. And if you're not a leader yet, this will get you in the habit of staying curious, of learning more about your teams. And that might be too manufactured, then do it your way. But the point is to really start thinking about the people around you, the relationships you have with them, and getting to know them. That is what makes a high capacity, powerful leader. Years ago, I made a change in my life by starting a leadership training organization. And I hired an amazing team. We did our first event, we had 100 people show up. Then the next one we had 200 and then 300, then it went to 400. And because we had so many people signing up, and these were 3-day training retreats, my team members were saying, "We need swag, Patty, we need swag." So we started selling t-shirts and sweatshirts and sweatpants and mugs and bags and luggage and pajamas and jackets. And with all this, it meant more work, more accountants, more attorneys. Suddenly, we were doing an event for 1,000 people. And it had turned into an expo at a hotel. And it was beyond anything I could ever dream or imagine. But with this event, as we were brainstorming, the team was dreaming about putting a rock wall in the middle of the ballroom. And I was becoming very overwhelmed, to the point where it was like fetal position overwhelmed. I was definitely dealing with decision fatigue. So I decided, thinking I was helping out the team on the side without going to them, I decided to outsource another team so we could catch all the things that we were missing. I did this change quickly and I did it without identifying the problem. I did it without involving the stakeholders, without getting buy-in or ownership on the decision. And what do you think happened? You can go ahead and put it in the chat. I've already beat myself up enough over it. It's okay. Yes, you don't like me. I'm not doing a very good job. I am not your A team anymore. You are trying to fire us. Pushback. What's going to happen now? There was a lot of loss. They felt slighted. I wounded every single one of them. And what happens when you do that? It's like taking this paper and rolling it up in a ball because you are crushing everyone around you. And then when you come back and go, oh, I'm sorry. When you try to get that and make it right, it is all messed up, right? No matter if I iron this, it still is going to have the scars of what took place there. It was horrible. And you can imagine with all of that, this amazing dynamic team spiraled. It was a tornado that was spinning out of control fast. So, as leaders, we make changes quickly and we don't always have the energy or the time to cater and cast the vision for changes needed. We can sit right here in a training, in a 1 hour training, and go, this is what you have to do, and this is what you have to do. But just like what was said earlier, we forget to humanize the situation, but it is imperative. My team lost trust in me, and I ended up eventually selling the organization. Just like we said earlier, 70% of organizational change fails. So don't miss it. So I shared my epic fail, and you see here on this next slide, building support. I did not have effective communication to build the support in those around me. So homework tonight. What I'd like for you to do, I already gave you some homework on the open-ended question. Now you have more homework, is write down how would you communicate a change? What resources do you need to have? So what resources would you use? And then craft this message or messages appropriate for each of your audiences on your team and determine the most effective package, timing, and methods for communicating. Okay, you don't see the building support slide? Building support, you have that, Rachel? Okay, now do we see it? We got it. All right, what I want you to do is I want you to take out a piece of paper. Take out a piece of paper, okay? And then I want you to take that paper. I'll give you a few seconds to take it out. And I want you to fold it in half. Fold the paper in half. And then after you fold the paper in half, I want you to take the right-hand corner and tear it. Tear off the corner, and then I want you to fold it in half again. Some of you analytical folks right now, this is driving you crazy. I know. I want you to take it, fold it in half, and I want you to tear off the left-hand corner, the top left-hand corner. And then I want you to fold it again. It's getting hard to fold. And tear off the bottom right-hand corner. And then for those of you who do have cameras, turn your camera on and show me the paper. And you're like, oh no, Patty, I didn't do it. Okay. And it should look like this. Can you see? Some of you are showing, thank you, Wanda. All right, look at Wanda's. Does Wanda's look like mine? Janelle. It's all different, right? What? What happened? Okay. If I did a good job communicating and you did a good job of listening, all of our sheets should have looked the same, right? Why do we not match? I didn't let you ask questions. That's why I said, some of you, yes, I did not model it for you. Okay, my directions could be interpreted in different ways. We need two-way communication. Everyone has a different filter. And if I'm not a leader that's ready to listen as I'm barking out orders, then that's what's going to happen. We're going to have people going all different directions and finding different ways to do it. So it's important to communicate what happens if we don't change, why the urgency or timing is important, who will be impacted the most during the change, and then allow for dialogue. This is the time for those powerful questions, those open ended questions, and then take time to listen. Some of you have heard this before, but managers tell, leaders listen. And if you're taking notes, managers tell, but leaders listen. There's a story about President Franklin Roosevelt, and he was at the White House. There was a reception taking place with about 200 people coming through. So here he is shaking hands with all these people, and he started getting bored. As he was shaking their hand, he started saying, I murdered my grandma this morning. And people would shake his hand, say what they wanted to say, and they would move on. This went on again and again and again. And finally, it was the ambassador to Bolivia. He leaned in. The president said, I murdered my grandma this morning. And he chuckled and said, I bet you she had it coming. So we're thinking of the story and we go, wow, here you are in front of the President of the United States, and we're not listening. What is happening? Right? We get in our own heads. Maybe it's fight or flight. Maybe they were so intimidated that they just panic. There's anxiety. Um, when this happens. I'm sure it's happened to you, right? When you've met someone and they've asked you a question and stupid comes out of your mouth. We've all been there. So we need to make space for this as leaders. When we're talking, there's panic sometimes, fight or flight, survival mode, and people might not fully engage and hear what is being said. The quote that I think about is by Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you do, but people will never forget how you make them feel. So, how you make people feel is important. Being supportive is so significant. Take a look at the slide here, which dictates all the things that are happening when we're dealing with change. There is a lot that is dictating both internally and externally. So no organization is an island. The external forces are always influencing and interacting with the existence. With all of these influences, feeling out of control can evoke emotions. So take a peek at that, all the external and the internal that we have to make space for. And then as we see there, the common reaction to change. What? We have to make room for emotions? I get knocked down, but I get up again. Right? Yes, you need to make room. You need your teams to know that emotions matter. And once again, if you're writing, if you're taking notes, I see you, you matter. I see you, you matter. I see you, you matter. According to research and psychological studies, 90% of all decisions are made from emotions. We often decide with our heart and then justify with our brains. And some of us that are more analytical, we're going, I do it with data and facts. Yeah, maybe. But what happens is 90% are from the decisions are from the emotions, and then we justify it with our brains. So let's pull back the curtain here and see what emotions and reactions we are dealing with. One of my favorite movies is Wizard of Oz. And I was so excited to watch. It would come on like once a year on a Sunday night. And I loved it. How Dorothy would start out with somewhere over the rainbow. But there is a scene when the great and powerful Oz is trying to intimidate Dorothy and her friends. And right when they're about ready to give up hope, Dorothy's dog Toto pulls back the curtain Oz was hiding behind. And it turns out that despite all the bells, the smoke, the whistles, the mighty Oz was actually just a simple old man. And as a leader, we need to be transparent. Not that you have to be a simple old man, but we need to be transparent with our emotions. Don't hide behind the curtain. Make it comfortable for people to be able to approach you, to communicate and share the fears and the loss that they might be facing. So, what are the common reactions as you're looking at that slide? Shock. When a change is announced, some people may feel that the change isn't necessary. They may be reluctant to listen. Sorry, my nose is starting to drip here. They may deny any facts, any information to support the change. They're going to have resistance, which we talked about. But what's really crazy is the people that are dealing with anger. When change occurs and the norm is uprooted, people can experience anger and they're going to lash out not only at each other, but often at the leader. And that's who they're going to be mumbling and grumbling about. There will be indifference where it's like, I don't care. I'm just going to be apathetic. I'm just going to show up and I'm going to get my paycheck. And it's really hard to motivate them. So we need to get that commitment. That commitment will occur when you get people involved with the buy-in and with the ownership. All right, here we are at the next slide. If you want ownership, be strategic. Use these tools. They will help facilitate the change process and provide the best change for success. So ask yourself these questions. Who am I going to start communicating with? And this is something you just sit down and you start writing out a list. Who do I need to start communicating with? Who are the advocates? Who are my loudmouths? Who are the ones that are very toxic? All right? We need to get those guys first, or girls, right? Who is your heart? Who is the one that everyone's running to? They're the compassionate one. They offer empathy. All of these people, we need to make sure that we are touching base with and communicating what's getting ready to happen. Then, after we have figured out who our change agents are going to be, educate, educate, educate. Everything speaks. Give them the why. Why are we doing this? And the what. Share the expected outcomes. And then training. Make sure all parties are trained and up to date with all the materials required for the change. A very important step if the change involves adding or removing any pertinent procedures within the business. Then flexibility. And I know flexibility is a curse word in a lot of organizations, right? I'm so tired of being flexible. You hear that often. But be flexible. Once you share the vision, stay curious about different ways to get there. Don't be so myopic, so close minded that you're not willing to hear what people have to say. Just because we're listening doesn't mean we have to follow through on every suggestion, but you might have someone that really has some great suggestions. We might have to modify or update the current plan to account for any unforeseen events. Also, once again, know the affected parties. It is especially important to have the individuals that are involved in the change, let them participate in the change process. Okay? They want a voice. I have seen this several times where someone who has a significant role that will be changing and they're not even a part of the meetings while we're figuring out who does what and what's the call to action and who do we need on board. And then they're the last to hear and they get wounded. It's like a knife just went in and they are bleeding out. They're very upset and they're holding it in. But once again, that crumpled up paper, it's hard to iron out the scars when we do it wrong the first time. So make sure we're looking at all the affected parties and the decision makers and letting them in on it. They do want a voice. So stay curious, empower them with the tasks that elevate their strengths. All right, next slide here, more juicy, sticky research. And I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Kurt Lewin. He is a physicist as well as a social scientist, and he explained organizational change using the analogy of changing the shape of a block of ice. And I really like this because it's easy for me. I'm so visual. To be able to achieve a transformation from one shape to another, it must first be melted. So we unfreeze, then we pour it into a new mold, which is the change, and then freeze it again, which is the refreeze. So basically, strategize and look before you leap, so to speak. What do I have to unfreeze? Then I make the change, I pour it into a mold, and then I refreeze it again. And like I did, all too often, leaders go into change blindly, causing much unnecessary turmoil and chaos. To begin any successful change process, you must first start by understanding why we have the change, why it has to take place, so you can unfreeze it and then refreeze. So, as Lewin put it, motivation for change must be generated before change can occur. All right, now we have in the next slide, Rick Mauer's 3 levels of resistance to change are, and this one, it just cracks me up, but most of us have been there. I don't get it, I don't like it, and I don't like you. We've heard of that, kill the messenger. And this, we really see it a lot when change is involved. And even when you do these town halls or you're casting the vision, if you don't have people on board, they are looking at you and going, I don't like you. Everything you do is irritating to me. And when I lay my head down at night and put my head on the pillow, I am not liking life. And I'm talking about you in loops in my head because you were the one that announced the change. So people may not resist the change itself, but rather the person making it or delivering the message. We have to consider that and be very aware of our approach when we are sharing the change. So, change is necessary, it's imperative, it's crucial, but here's the lip smacking secret sauce. You can be ready for it. Okay, how do we get ready for it? On the next slide here, real change doesn't happen overnight. I want you guys just in the chat, real quick, write down a simple change that you have dealt with. Just a simple change. Just write it down in the chat. It might have been you had a baby, or you got married, or I think of, yes, Adam, a newborn. That one is a big, huge change. I know when I dealt with even getting pregnant, I had my office taken away when I was on maternity leave. And I thought, you can't do that. You can't take my office. And I had such a fit about it. And now I look back at that and go, what was my big loss there? They gave me a cubicle, and then I had my cubicle for about 6 months. I loved it. And when my office was given back to me, I had a fit about that, right? That was another change. It's like, wait, I like being out here with all the people. So it's crazy how we deal with change. Okay, a coworker left, and they were probably very helpful to you, one of your friends. So there's grief involved there when you're dealing with that kind of change. Moved into a new house, all of your routines change, all of your habits are turned upside down. Okay, fourth grandchild. Mark, that's a beautiful change. A new job. The way our office announcements are formatted. Okay, Wanda. See, it's all of these different changes that we are dealing with, and most likely it's never the same. It's never the same change. It's never the same way we look at it. It's never the same approach that has been given. So you can be the leader, though, that makes a dent in your corner of the world. When you think back on your change and how you experienced it, it helps you now to be able to cast the vision to others. You will know how to have faster change transitions simply by being aware of the stages that teams go through as the routines are being disrupted. You will continue to share the why and explain the what instead of just brushing it off and ignoring the low morale, which will only lead to stronger resistance. How many of you actually do weekly one-on-ones? Just do a raise it. Raise your hand. Okay. No one? All right. Put in the chat if you are doing quarterly. Just say yes in the chat. All right. So if you are a leader, okay, there we go, Janelle, twice a week. I just want to challenge you to amp it up a little bit. If we really want to know our teams and we really want to be able to understand what's in it for them, even if it's small incremental changes, then we need to be able to have those face-to-face or those Zoom calls to be able to talk to them, connect with them, know what's going on in their world. So and if you're going, no, Patty, I'm not a leader, then lead up and start asking your leader for those one-on-ones. So here you are, you can look at this change curve, continue to share the why and the what, and the change curve shows how people react to extreme change through the stages of, once again, shock, denial, anger, depression, acceptance, And then finally, they'll hopefully be able to integrate the change. All right, last slide here. Be the change Jedi. And once again, I'm going to go through those changes. Step one, identify the change that needs to happen. The why, the what. Step two, engage your stakeholders. Empower your change agents. What's in it for them? Language the word you. And step three, cast the vision. Vision leaks. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Everything speaks, even your body language. Everything speaks. Well, although the workshop is ending, I hope that your journey to understanding change management is just beginning. So sign in.